Michael. I'm trying to get an idea of what happened to you.
I saw it in her eyes. It was the same thing I saw in his eyes. Like he was afraid.
Afraid of what?
Of me.
I will say that having seen both Z and Superhost, which are Brandon Christensen's previous films, I'm sort of seeing a trend with this guy where he makes mostly forgettable horror fare that sort of is punctuated by these moments of brilliance or moments that have you sort of sitting up in your chair a little straighter. If Z was his attempt at a paranormal movie and Superhost was his attempt at a slasher movie, then I guess the Puppetman sort of has a foot in both genres. But it never really quite knows what it wants to be, and it never really even knows if it wants to be either of those either, and if it just wants to throw all that stuff to the wayside and become like a cult horror film. And this is a very ambitious film that is really let down by its small budget and some kind of dodgy acting and a little bit of miscasting, in my opinion. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but I think this totally would have worked better as like a 6-episode limited series to just kind of expand the lore, expand the premise, set up the rules a little bit better. But as it stands, it's a 1.5 hour long movie and it's just fine. And that's kind of... Welcome to Theater and Stream, a film podcast. I am Matt, and that is Chuck, and this is episode 29. As the Swifties overtake movie theaters across the U.S., Chuck and I have hunkered down in our homes to bring you another movie review. True to the month of October, we're looking at the latest from Shudder's go-to guy, Brandon Christensen, with a look today at The Puppetman. But that's not all. We're giving you a double dose of horror movie goodness with the second edition of the Halloween Scare Stream. It's also a bit of a spooky week in movie news as we contend with the end of physical media and directors who insist on recutting their films. And of course, after everything's said and done, we're going to bring the show home with the Mentionables. You're going to find timestamps in the episode description. Please like and subscribe if you like what you see, and give us a rating on the podcast service of your choice if you like what you hear. But that's the business end of the show. Chuck, take it away.
Golly, things are positively macabre, gothic. Everything's looking kind of bleak. Your local Best Buy, while they did feel like there was a resurgence in physical media for vinyl and such with them, they're finally going to stop selling physical movies, as I understand it. Is that correct?
Yeah, so they have basically said that they're going to stop carrying all DVDs, Blu-rays, and 4K Blu-rays as soon as Q1 of 2024. So, as soon as 6 months from now, probably.
Okay. And
they have said both in-store and online. So they're just going complete scorched earth with this. And it's kind of a big surprise for sort of the US's probably largest electronics store at this point, now that all the other ones have pretty much gone out of business.
Exactly. Who does this leave? It's basically just Walmart and Target and I suppose Redbox, which is apparently owned by Chicken Soup for the Soul Productions at this present time. When was the last time have you ever used a Redbox?
Oh yeah, definitely. I used a Redbox probably as late as maybe, I don't know, 6 or 7 months ago, because yeah, I find that they are. I use them a lot when I'm back home in Fargo because my mom doesn't have Wi-Fi.
Oh really? Okay.
So we still rent movies on disc and stuff, and so but yeah, you're right about that. I mean, there's still some red boxes out there. Target, though, I will say this: back in September, Target made an announcement that they are also going to get rid of their physical media sections. So
no way. So
yeah,
I can't go to Target and buy a movie now.
Well, you might be able to, but it's gonna be like they're literally going to have like 1 or 2 end caps, like at the very front of the store, and that's it. And so yeah, it pretty much leaves Walmart at this point, which makes sense because Walmarts tend to be in like more rural areas. You can have a small town of 8,000-9,000 people and they'll have a Walmart, and so obviously the internet's not as good in those places yet, and so Walmarts probably still sell a good amount of physical discs because people in those rural areas are buying them. And yeah, that's pretty much going to be your source from now on if you want stuff like this in person,
because Amazon will always be there. Like the demand for physical media isn't going to go away just because the show floor is going away for it. Well, the Grim Reaper might be coming for your Blu-rays and your DVDs, but there's necromancers also at work in cinema these days, because as we've kind of been noticing with our friend Ridley Scott, the guy just can't seem to be okay with the theatrical cut of any of his films. And Napoleon, we have learned, is going to be the latest, but it's the embargo on it is uncomfortably brief from theatrical to this director's cut digital version that's given on Apple TV Plus. Like, what is the thinking behind this, and in what way does this diminish the product that we're getting originally?
Yeah, so basically there is going to be the theatrical cut of Napoleon, which comes out the day before Thanksgiving. It's going to be 158 minutes, so still pretty long. And then he's going to drop a 250-minute cut on Apple TV Plus sometime in the future, which is 4 hours and 10 minutes for those who don't want to do the math. And yeah, so that's pretty nuts. But yeah, I don't know. This almost makes me wonder if it's even worth seeing the movie in theaters, because you're getting the studio cut, basically. You're getting the producer cut. You're getting the movie executive cut. That's what this movie is. That's going to be in theaters. And so it's like, I don't know, it's almost not even worth it, because that 250-minute cut is going to be on Apple TV Plus by Christmas. Like, if the theatrical cut comes out on Thanksgiving or the day before Thanksgiving, I guarantee this is going to hit Apple TV Plus on either Christmas Eve or Christmas Day.
Because traditionally, these director's cut things would come sometimes a year or two after the theatrical release, sometimes even decades after the theatrical release. And in some cases, it saves the movie. Like, in Ridley Scott's case, this happened to him directly. So yeah, is this in some way him signaling, that the movie you're going to see in theaters is going to be like Kingdom of Heaven compared to the version that I'm going to give you myself? Is this just sly marketing? Is he playing on our expectations and the historical record when it comes to these things? Is this just a subtle acknowledgement that you're getting a compromised version if you see this in the theater?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't doubt it, because whoever told him, I mean, maybe nobody even told him. I mean, he's an old crotchety man at this point, so he probably just said this, but whoever didn't rein him in with this is so stupid, because this is something that this is information that should have come out after the first weekend of the movie head in theaters, because now that we know this is the case, it really sort of diminishes that theatrical cut. And the one thing I'll say is, I think movie buffs tend to want to say that all directors' cuts are good, but in Ridley Scott's case, that is not the case. That is not the situation, because, Kingdom of Heaven, yes, good. Blade Runner, good. But then you take a look at some of his other director's cuts, like the Counselor director's cut.
Oh God, that exists?
Yeah, that exists. Oh. And there's no saving that movie. And I mean, even like, something like, there's a director's cut out there for The Martian, and it's just like, it's not so much that it makes the movie worse, but it's completely pointless, because I think it's like two or 3 minutes longer, and it's just completely unnecessary. Yeah, it's just a marketing ploy for this guy at this point. God, and there was something that he said in that particular interview. I flashed it somewhere in this, but he apparently shot Napoleon in like a month and a half. Yeah. Basically, and he's shooting his Gladiator sequel also in like 60 days, because he's just a madman, and he has like so many cameras running that it's like something like 15 to 20 cameras on some of these epic action sequences. So there just must be an endless amount of footage available for him to do this thing with it. So yeah, we're gonna get so many different versions of this Gladiator movie too, and for all we know, he's just gonna do what Baz Luhrmann is gonna do here, and he's been announced to be taking Australia and turning it into a 6-part miniseries for Hulu. They're going back to a dog of a fucking movie that came out like more than a decade ago, and now they're just like, oh, by the way, there is so much that we could have given you, and now we're gonna give it to you. Who wants this, Baz? No one wants this. Like, do you have great affection for this movie? Am I wrong? No, I remember I saw this in theaters. I remember that, and I just remember it being, Australia was such like a navel-gazy, like, I mean, it was a love letter to his sort of home country, I suppose. And also Nicole Kidman and Hugh Jackman treated it that way also. We're all from Australia, and this is going to be our big love letter to the country. But I don't know, that just didn't really translate into like a good film. It was just incredibly long and boring and navel-gazy, and yeah, just I can't even imagine what, I think they said that it's going to be 6 parts, and I'd imagine that each of those parts is probably going to be an hour or 50 minutes. So yeah, I can't even imagine a 6-hour version of this thing.
The only thing that maybe could be fleshed out more is the story of the Aboriginal child and that aspect of the story. Because yeah, like this, now that I remember this movie, it's like a little bit of like a Western frontier story. It's also like the Australian Pearl Harbor, like there's it's a historical romantic epic, and it's also a subversive political commentary about the nation of Australia as it exists today versus the Aboriginal origins, of the country. And yeah, so there's probably more to mine out of it for a modern audience, maybe, but I'm not going to commit 6 hours of my life to this. But this makes me ask this question: what filmmaker or what like movie would you want to see fleshed out or get a director's cut? Like it can't just be for these old washed up has-beens. Like, is there like, would you want Robert Eggers to be able to do The Northman the way that he intended? Like, couldn't we get that maybe someday, or is he too pure to admit that what he gave us wasn't as good as it could have been?
Yeah, I mean, that would be cool. That would be really cool. Whenever I see this question, the first thing that always springs to mind is that like 4.5-hour Venice Film Festival cut of the assassination of Jesse James that I've always heard about.
Legendary.
Yeah, it's completely like only one group of probably a couple hundred people actually saw that thing, and it's never been screened anywhere else otherwise. And so it's almost mythical at this point, because anytime anybody asks Andrew Dominique about it in an interview, he just kind of brushes them off, and he's just like, no, it's not a thing, and that's pretty much it.
It's either that or like the whole bloody affair. That's another thing that like somebody's got to be able to wrest that out of the clutches of whatever zombie corporation exists to manage the Weinstein Company at this point. Like, my God, like we can't continue to allow such things to just be apocryphal. Like, and that's where I kind of at. Like, it needs to be something that that we've been tantalized with in the past. That's what I'd prefer. But speaking of Australia, this is kind of topical. The Watchlist this week. I'm saying farewell to HBO Max, whatever the fuck it's called. I finally let my subscription lapse. I did one of those things where I just didn't update my credit card information because my debit card expired. And I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to see if I can live without this, because we own Totoro, and who gives a shit about the other Studio Ghibli movies? Like, we don't need HBO in our lives, when I can sail the seven seas if I need to see something specific. But the last thing I watched was this. Last Stop Larrimah, Murder Down Under. This is a fascinating bit of true crime, documentary, it's kind of a thing. Because it's about this bumfuck Northern Territories town in Australia, in the bush, in the desert, where people just go to just make time stop. There's a wonderful moment where a character's describing what it's like living there, and it's like you're living in a stasis field. And then suddenly you just get slapped in the face by the progress of the world around you because someone shows up to remind you that other things are happening. Because all these people do is just wake up, putz around their house, drink beer, go to one of the bars that they're friendly with, drink some more beer, eat meat pies, and that's their lives. But then one day, one of these guys just goes missing. There's no hide or hair of him, and there's 19 suspects. And this movie is just about, or 10, whatever it is. And it's just looking at all the people it possibly could have been, because they've never found a compelling case against anybody enough to actually charge anyone. So it's very fascinating because this whole country has just been looking at this little fucking town and wondering who the fuck killed this guy. But it's all about first impressions, and this documentary does something kind of unforgivable to me, which is they hold back key fucking facts until the end of the runtime because they just want to wrap the thing up and move on with it. Because it's very endearing, very compelling, and especially the man who goes missing, you really like him. You like all of these people, and then you get to know them, and you just realize how fucking shitty they are. Because before the documentary crews showed up, some news station came by to do a story about two feuding meat pie businesses in the town. Because that's like an Australian staple. Like, if you win the national competition, it's a big deal. And these two businesses are competing. They're mad at each other. And the way that they were talking about each other to the documentarians versus how they talk to this old canned news footage from a couple years previously is night and day. They're being honest, before the scrutiny really comes to the town, before the murder. And then after the murder, they really have to be like, oh, come on now, you're having something on us here. You're pulling our leg, tell us the truth. How do you really feel? And the conclusion isn't satisfying, but it's definitely worth the watch, especially if you like Ozploitation stuff like I do.
So I actually was able to, I didn't finish it, but I got about a half hour into this with the intention of continuing it. So are you saying that there is no answer by the end of the movie?
There is no answer by the end of the movie.
Okay. Man, that really kind of irks me a bit because I don't know if I
unless
really
I misremember. That. No,
okay.
There is no answer by the end of the movie. It's just it's a whodunit. of the highest order. It's like watching Paradise Lost, before they let those guys out, and like knowing who the best suspect could be, knowing that those people are still locked up. It's a little bit different than like making a murderer, because there's no one's had this pinned on them enough, but they all have their suspicions about each other, and it's just, you're just left twisting in the wind at the end of it. But it's kind of the point. Like, this is the kind of town. Did you ever see Wake and Fright? I've talked about that movie before. It's very similar to like the community in that, the Yaba, and this town, Larrimah. It's you go there and these towns ruin you. They suck the life out of you, and there's nothing. It's like Chinatown, baby. There's nothing that comes to like, and that's what pissed me off. It's like they held back on the truth, which is, guess is as good as mine, mate. Which is just the most infuriating thing a true crime story can be. Like, you got to give me something better than that. Than, here's like the dozen people it could have been. Like, give me something more than that. Yeah. November has been picking the things we watch a lot lately. So I got the privilege of getting to watch a lot of Spider-Man the animated series from the 90s this week. God, this show rules. The first like 12 episodes or so that we've seen, like Marv Wolfman is in the writing credits on some of these, which makes me think that they just took comic stories and transposed them, into the show. I don't know enough about the production history, but by God, this thing is a gem. And as long as they're, rebirthing, 90s franchises as they were, like the X-Men show, please do this one too. Goddamn. Like, I know it goes off the rails eventually, but that's Spider-Man comics. That Spider-Man stories are stupid. The clone, saga, for example, is just retarded. But it, I'll take it, especially, if Morbius and Blade also happen to show up again.
Yeah, that series is great. I love everything that series like specifically does with Madam Web. All that stuff is really, really great. But yeah, I'm glad that you're raising the kid on good shows.
Dude, she chose it. Her mom was like,
awesome.
Put on one of the Tobey Maguire movies so she'll like those ones more. And then everyone was like, no, I don't want to watch that one. And then she had me pull up the full list of Spider-Man content on Disney Plus, and she walked up and she pointed at the Spider-Man she wanted. So, but the time has come for the Halloween Scare stream, our second week of it. Right off the bat, I started it off right, I guess, because I watched this yesterday. Because you must. It's Halloween. It's Friday the 13th. You watch the original, the one where it's not Jason Voorhees. It's his mom. Spoiler alert if you haven't seen it yet, because I think most people just bypass this one and jump right into the others, because it's, there's just so fucking many of them. But I guess, which one is your favorite Friday the 13th?
I like 3. Part 3 is my favorite. I think it has one of the best. I don't know. Have you seen Part 3?
I have not.
Okay. That one has one of the best kills in it of the entire franchise, where Jason basically just throws somebody out of a second-story window and their body just flies through a deck and then hits the ground. And yeah, I think it's probably also the best actual movie out of any of them.
Because that's the problem with this first one. It is so homespun. I cannot believe that people actually kind of found it scary, because it's so slow. If it weren't for that fucking whatever the sound is, the soundtrack is the only thing that creates tension in the whole experience. It's dull. I was surprised by how dull it proved to be, because I watched those documentaries that Netflix does about classic films, and the story behind this movie, I guess I'll kind of want to, it made me want to rewatch that episode but maybe I'll have to watch 3 if I can get around to it. Time is short, and I waste my time watching things that aren't actually horror films for the Scare stream, but we'll save that for later. You were able to check out something that I couldn't finish. I started it, couldn't finish it. Totally killer. is it worth seeing through to the end?
Oh man, not really. I mean, it's fine. And this is, for anybody that doesn't know, this is the new Prime Video release. It's about a girl who lives in a small town, and she travels back in time to the 1980s to contend with a serial killer that originally stalked her mother and her mother's friends. And it's, I don't know, it's just kind of, yeah, cool premise.
Yeah.
Very cool premise. But I don't know, this thing is, I guess I just got to come out and say, I think Kiernan Shipka is a really bad actor.
Fuck yeah, she is. She's so wooden. She is so flat. And I've honestly, it's like she hasn't progressed since she was playing an emotionally stunted child on Mad Men. She is still doing the same shtick.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up. I was gonna bring that up is, she's great in Mad Men because she's basically playing in like a mini carbon copy of Betty Draper, who is played by January Jones, who is also a bad actress, but it works for the character. And now, Kiernan Shipka, I think, is in her early 20s, I believe. And, it's just something where she should have progressed by now in her abilities. And it's just, yeah, she's very, very wooden and just not a good actress. And that sort of brings the whole movie down. But the other thing that kind of brings this movie down is, because it's this modern Gen Z girl who gets transported to the 80s, most of the comedy in this movie, because this movie is considered a horror comedy, most of the comedy in this movie isn't really even comedy. It's just her pointing out how problematic things are.
God, and I noticed that in like the first 15 minutes that I was able to see. I was like, okay, like the first time, maybe worth a laugh, but geez Louise, like, is this really all you got?
Yeah, and it's fine if you want to do like those fish out of water jokes and scenarios, you totally can, but you actually have to craft jokes. You have to derive the comedy from like the writing. And it's literally just her being like, oh, that was bad, or like, oh, that was offensive. And, it's just her pointing things out. And there are times occasionally where stuff like that works because there's an actual joke there. Like there's this one funny moment where one of the guys that she's like hanging out with, one of her mom's friends, he tries to get the keys to the car from her, and she's like, no, you've been drinking. And then he's like, I drive better after a couple beers. And he like pulls the keys from her hands. And so like that stuff is funny, but most of the stuff just really isn't. And yeah, pretty forgettable overall. I mean, it's, if you want just something to throw on in the background, then, go ahead. But yeah, nothing special.
See, what I did watch instead was My Best Friend's Wedding. Because for some reason I wanted to watch a rom-com, because if there's anything that can ever be made unintentionally into a horror film, if you just have like a horror soundtrack running in your head instead of the mindless, 90s music that they used, it is a 90s rom-com, especially anyone starring Julia Roberts, because she's secretly a scary person. Like she blew her chance to truly be a wicked witch and like evil stepmother in that one Disney movie, because like she is terrifying in this. When you see like to the lengths that she goes to, how duplicitous and evil she is. Like this character is genuinely awful. One of the most awful and repugnant people who's ever existed. And all the characters say that to her face. But then they still have to like make you feel good, so they inexplicably forgive her. They they always think it's a common trope in these kinds of movies. So I don't know, like she's just gaslit and brainwashed all of these people. So the end of this movie to me just felt like an evil villain triumphing more than anything. It's like I didn't get what I wanted, but everyone still has to keep me around. They can't be rid of me. Goddamn. But at the same time, the best part of this movie is still the Say a Little Prayer for You, like Dionne Warwick sing-along that happens when they're at that one restaurant. But my God, what a fucking experience this was to come back to. So yeah, my fish out of water story, watching this artifact from the 90s. Advance through that, and then here you are with, I wish I could have watched this.
Yeah, this is Monster Inside, I believe. The America's Most Extreme Haunted House is the subtitle, and this is another documentary about Russ McCamey, who ran McCamey Manor, which is America's Most Extreme Haunted House. You've probably heard of it by now. He basically makes you sign a waiver when you go there, and there is no tapping out, there is no quitting, and they will slap you in the face. They will put you in confined spaces. They will make you eat bugs. You know, it's pretty disgusting. And the people who actually choose to participate in this are only outdone in their craziness and their psychoticness by the man who runs it, Russ McCamey. And this, like I said, this has gotten multiple documentaries. It got one 5 years ago called The Art of the Scare, and then it also got a whole episode of Netflix's Dark Tourist series devoted to it. And so, you know, you kind of going into this, you sort of wonder, like, what else can this documentary bring to the table? And it is sort of interesting in that regard because we get an update to this story, because we're, 5 or 6 years later now, and people always knew that this guy was a psychopath, but there really was no proof at the time when these other documentaries came out. And now there's proof, and now there's definitely some really sinister stuff going on where he had to shut down the town that he was running his haunted house out of. He had to shut it down, and then he moved halfway across the country and started doing really, really shady shit. Like, he would, because he didn't have a haunted house anymore, he would get like these Facebook messages from like women, like singular girls, and about doing this, and then he would like fly them out to his like area, his like neck of the woods, and he would like put on like individual like solo experiences for them, and it was all sort of
horror experiences.
Yeah, and it was just very sinister stuff. And he pretty much did it to the end of, getting his rocks off, basically, because this is the type of stuff that he needs to do to get his rocks off.
He's a sadist, basically.
Yeah. And so, yeah, it is sort of interesting in that regard as sort of an update to this story. But this doc gets, I don't know, it gets a little like almost like they don't have enough material to work with at points, because there's certain points in the doc where they bring in like trauma psychologists to just like define what trauma means, and they bring in like Guantanamo Bay lawyers to define what torture is. Like, what is torture? What is the definition of torture? And it's I don't know, it's like they didn't have enough to work with, so they have to do all these like
academic bullshit. Like, this is really about education. This is about the public learning.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I mean, it's if you haven't seen any of the documentaries about this guy, this is totally worth watching just to get the whole story. If you're just looking for an update to the story, you're probably better off, reading like a news article about everything that's happened since, I would say.
I see. Yeah. Gotcha. Because like this is the kind of thing that, I've seen lots of like YouTuber content about, but they can never show you how fucked up it actually is. And from the clips I've seen of that, you actually get to see what they actually do to people, and not just hear, some YouTuber's perceptions of it. All right. Now, I don't know, this thing almost deserved like an episode all to its own, but of course we haven't finished it yet. You are like 4 episodes in. I'm about at episode 5. But dear God, The Fall of the House of Usher from Mike Flanagan. What do you make of it?
Yeah, so I don't know. I guess to me, it's sort of like, I feel like I do this every year now, where it's like, new Mike Flanagan, same old problems. And I don't even know why the guy still pretends like he's interested in making horror, because what this show screams to me is a director wanting to break from his labels and break from his sort of typecast, because I don't think it's not enough that each episode you just throw out a couple of jump scares and you put a couple of people in the background of a couple shots just out of frame, a creepy silhouette of a person. That is not enough to call something horror. And I don't know. I think you're kind of being grifted if you think that's what this is, because it's not enough to even call itself Edgar Allan Poe, because he names a couple of buildings like, oh, this is the Rue Morgue, and he gives a couple of characters anachronistic names and just calls it a day, and he's like, this is Edgar Allan Poe now, and it really has nothing to do with Edgar Allan Poe. And so what this show seems to me like it is it's incredibly trashy. It's like Mike Flanagan watched Succession and thought, I can do that. I can write on the level of Jesse Armstrong, and instead what he turned out is basically more along the lines of a Ryan Murphy show, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, but that's the thing. Ryan Murphy knows he's camp. Ryan Murphy knows he's trash, and he doesn't care. He luxuriates in it, drapes himself in it. He's Oscar the fucking Grouch. And Mike Flanagan here doesn't realize he's slumming it for some fucking reason, because it is insufferable. It is pants shittingly stupid the way that he makes some of these characters talk. And I can't believe these actors, I guess they're just desperate for work, because if I had read this script, I would have been like, Mike, are you sure you couldn't have done a few more goes at what you have me say here? Are you sure you want me saying this? Like, the character of Prospero, like, cartoonishly perverted and lecherous, but he talks like he doesn't talk like any human being I've ever heard of, ever met. Like even on a 4chan message board, they aren't that stupid.
He talks like exactly what the person who's making this show is, like a 50-year-old man writing a 20-year-old Gen Z kid who is a pervert, basically. And so if I were a rich fuck off from the Sackler family, because that's what he's doing. He's like, oh, people are gonna miss Succession, we can plug this into that hole, but I'm gonna make it about the Sackler family and these billionaire assholes and yada yada. And he does do a somewhat compelling job when he does these projects for Netflix, where he takes like gothic horror or like the work of some author and finds some way to construct his own story out of their frameworks, out of their skeleton. But he's just a necromancer, and he never is actually making anything actually as near as good as the source material. Like, you almost respect more what people like Guillermo del Toro are doing, or Wes Anderson are doing with Netflix, even though Wes Anderson's a hack too. Don't get me wrong, he still made bad content, but they're more genuine. Like, Flanagan actually thinks he's giving you something better than the genuine article here. His reinterpretation is a work all unto its own, which is why it's so all over the place and so bizarre. But like, all of these people talk like him. They all have his, and within the first 15 minutes, when we're having yet another, this is why fundamentalist Christians are stupid and evil, I was like, fucking A, dude, you did an entire fucking show about this. Like, we don't need to hear it again. We know. We give us Edgar Allan Poe, and that's not what he's not concerned with that at all. It's like how can I make Edgar Allan Poe say the thing I want to say today? That's what he does. Exactly. And it goes back to I know this was a huge complaint with Midnight Mass, and I'm gonna bring it up again here because he hasn't done anything to remedy this, but oftentimes it's just there are entire scenes that are just one character monologuing at two other characters, and they're so awful. I mean, I want to call out a couple of specific ones. There's this really awful monologue that Bruce Greenwood's character has to give about like like inflating the price of lemons. Do you remember that one?
Yeah, it's just like, what the fuck? Like,
Yeah.
like where are you getting this from, dude? And just
Yeah, and then and then there's another one too that when they're doing the flashbacks and Zach Gilford is talking to his boss, and his boss is like giving this whole monologue about how like ideas are a fart that your brain makes, and it's just like, what are we doing? And it's not as smart as he thinks it is, and oftentimes it really does just come across as like pure like cringe, you know. Gosh, I just can't. There are a couple things that you know, what makes this worse is that I didn't really like Midnight Mass. I didn't find there was a whole lot to like about that show, but this show, there are a couple elements that I actually do like. And that sort of is what's keeping me watching. And one of those things I did want to call out was everything that Mark Hamill is doing.
Yeah.
Because he's incredible in this show. You know, he's like the one guy who realizes what type of show he's in, because he's like putting on this really like campy like voice. You know, he is a voice actor, and he's doing this really campy voice, and he's doing all this stuff with his body language where he's like really like constricted and like hobbling around, and I really like everything he's doing.
Yeah, because you know we're not getting anything new from Bruce Greenwood or Carla Gugino, you know, and yeah, I'm just so distracted by how concerned he is with sexual depravity. Every single kid in this family, except for Henry Thomas's character, is just a degenerate weirdo in a way that Succession never went with. You know, like it's just silly. Like the daughter who just has two assistants that she also fucks, you know, like the full service employment that she gets from them, the weird like cuck queen situation going on with the influencer, you know, husband, like eventually I was just like please make it stop. So by the time like they turned the acid on the orgy, I was like, thank God, maybe we'll stop having weird sex happen. No, not the case. It continues. But like that was a moment that I really latched onto. Like when things are getting gory, like when people are dying, it fucking rules. But then those moments are far too brief. There's too much vast desert of cringe in between the stuff that does get the blood pumping, unfortunately.
Yeah, and you know when it's gonna come. Always, it's always at the end of the episode. Every episode, it's literally the exact. It's like the last 10 minutes, and so yeah, you know when the show is gonna be tedious and boring, and then you know when it's gonna get good. And yeah, I totally agree with you. The sort of kills and the gore and stuff is really well done. I especially, as you pointed out, I like the acid rain, and then also when Rahul Kohli's character gets his like cornea scratched by the cat, and he looks in the mirror. Oh, that was so gross, and that was really well done. But yeah, it's like the last 5 minutes of every episode.
And then he gets the hooks in, and he tricks you into thinking that, well, there's more to this, and there's never ever more to it. You know, it's just the same pablum and the same pattern, and unless that's the thing, I'm probably going to finish watching it, because unfortunately there still is something compelling about it, and there's still something I am enjoying, despite I'm yelling at my TV half the time. I'm just like, why are you doing this? You're a grown man. Like it's almost like you need to take a cell phone out of the hands of a boomer. That's what it feels like. But they need to like take the keyboard away from this guy for a little bit. But that's the scare stream for this week. We'll keep it going until the end of the month, until Spooktober is finally in the rearview mirror, because now it's time to talk about the Puppetman.
Yeah, so I got the introduction this week. I will say that having seen both Z and Superhost, which are Brandon Christensen's previous films, I'm sort of seeing a trend with this guy where he makes mostly forgettable horror fare that sort of is punctuated by these moments of brilliance or moments that have you sort of sitting up in your chair a little straighter. If Z was his attempt at a paranormal movie and Superhost was his attempt at a slasher movie, then I guess the Puppetman sort of has a foot in both genres, but it never really quite knows what it wants to be, and it never really even knows if it wants to be either of those either, and if it just wants to throw all that stuff to the wayside and become like a cult horror film. And this is a very ambitious film that is really let down by its small budget and some kind of dodgy acting and a little bit of miscasting, in my opinion. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but I think this totally would have worked better as like a 6-episode limited series to just kind of expand the lore, expand the premise, you know, set up the rules a little bit better. But as it stands, it's a 1.5 hour long movie, and it's just fine. And that's kind of that's where I'm at with it.
Yeah, because it's not on the level of Talk to Me, not even close. Even though I found they had a lot in common, you know, especially in the way that this movie handles the setup and letting you get to know the characters. It just would have been nicer if they were more interesting, or if the actors were more on point, or if the writing had been tightened up a little bit. Because yeah, like you point out in the document, there's every time they talked about that one guy doing steroids, I just laughed because he was just a scrawny little like swimmer body, and they're like acting like he's some meathead. And unless the idea was, oh well, has a little guy with a complex, and they're just like making fun of him for trying too hard. I don't know, but like I got taken out of the experience here or there. Even though like I saw the honest effort going into it, yeah, it just gets lazy after a while. It's not like the case with It Follows, where like the beauty is its ambiguity and the mystery surrounding exactly what is going on. As soon as you have someone throw a fucking leather-bound tome with like gold letters announcing exactly who the bad guy of the movie actually is, I'm done. I am not interested, which makes me mad because that final act does get kind of cool because your protagonist, the character who you think is the one who's in danger, you come to find out they are the danger the whole time. Like you find out like if this, but he's trying to do too many other movies at once. You know, he's trying to be Hereditary. He's trying to you maybe make a Smile type of a movie, but there's not enough memorable kills. Like you also have pointed out, that first kill just made me laugh out loud because of the way that they just like digitally bent her leg the wrong direction. Like there are moments in this where it's like, oh god, this looks like a short film versus the feature that it's supposedly supposed to be. And I'm curious, are you interested in finding out more about this cult and like her parents? Like where do they get their fealty to this entity to begin with? Yeah, because like there's a lot of elements that just kind of get thrown out there that make you go, hold on, how come we're not pursuing it further? Is that kind of where you're coming from? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the idea behind, making this, limited series or something like that. There just needs to be something else to grab onto because there really isn't. I mean, even like the book that's like this, I don't know, this tome of this cult, the cult of Dolos or whatever it was called. You never actually really even see like or know like what that is about. I think there's one point where the girl is flipping through it in the library and you see a couple pictures and that's pretty much it. And so yeah, we don't know, are there other people in this cult? Like, are they around, or did they get like fizzle out in the 80s, or what there's nothing there to grab onto.
And that's what bothered me. It's about the rules, as they exist. Does she need to be in the same room to command you? How is she able to kill her friends from her dorm room?
Yeah.
She does. Because she's flipping through the book and she sees the picture And is that enough for the entity to like get into her mind? We don't know, but we do need to know that it has a stupid name, somewhat related to, Greek mythology, apparently. Yeah, this like, I don't know. There was a part of me like in the opening act before it got all stupid where I was like, wow, this is pretty good. Like, I am in this. What a good year for horror. And then back at the back end of it, I'm like, oh, this is why, Smile got to be in theaters and this movie didn't. It becomes obvious what you're getting.
Yeah, it's just for the most part not terribly memorable, and I do want to call out before we get too far in, because this happens in literally the first 5 minutes, but there are voice cameos from
That's right.
Henry Zabrowski and Ben Kissel from Last Podcast on the Left. I don't know, that was really odd to me, that like, because I mean they have very, very noticeable voices.
More than that, they use the actual Last Podcast on the Left.
They do, yeah.
Podcasting logo. So like this was sanctioned. This was a deal brokered, with the Last Podcast Network, and I feel like there's going to be more of that happening. I know they have comics coming out these days too, but because of current events, it like made me like pause. Because he's kicked off the show, Mr. Kissel, due to, events happening in his personal life and mistreatments he allegedly may have done. And initially he just went away for rehab, and now he's officially kicked. He's gone, and Ed Larson is sitting in that chair now, and I just feel so dirty listening to it without him, for some reason. So like I was shook hearing him in this, but it was subtle critique of what they do, in a way, because like that, and that's something that like Angie's had to experience. There, like a former friend of hers, did go on to kill her mom and stepmom, and for some reason, some local murder podcasters here in Minot were kind of following on this narrative that she was abused and was just killing her abuser. And there wasn't anything, really wrong about what she did. She should be released from jail. And Angie interviewed for that podcast, and it never released. Because it's like, well, like, what are your priorities here? And in that moment, it was an interesting narrative, like story piece, I guess, to focus on the child of a grisly murder, survivor of that. And like, what is it like having your experiences just be podcast fodder for Henry Zabrowski and Ben Kissel to riff on? Like the line about I got like goth legs, or like whatever he says. Like they let him like do some bits, and I appreciated that. But then they just jump right into the effect of what they do, and I found that interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was pretty interesting, and then. It's a shame it can't really, the movie can't hold up to that, because then we sort of get like, I don't know, I would say like a half hour of just getting to know these characters after that.
Yeah.
And I thought they were fine for the most part. I think the main girl, Michael, she really, really waffled between like being good in some scenes and then bad in some, as far as her chops go. I don't think she was good enough to carry a movie though. I actually thought her friend, who dies like 20 minutes in, the first friend to die, is a way better actor than she was.
She should have been the lead, honestly.
Yeah, she should have.
A much stronger actress. And but she just maybe didn't have the right demon face for the poster.
Yeah,
I think that's what it boils down to.
Yeah. And then we have the skinny gym rat, which I also found very odd, and then the girl who it just her one sort of character trait is always smoking, and of course that comes into play a little bit later.
Yeah,
and
dude, like her death, holy shit, like that, and see, that's where I was like, okay, you're cooking with something here, even though your rules don't make sense, because that was brutal. And I wasn't really sure what was going to happen with her until like it things literally start catching fire, as it were. And
that is the best part of the movie. I mean, the sort of double, I guess it's like a double kill, with the kind of shooting between her in the library and then the other guy in the weight room. And yeah, I found that, especially with the weight room part, I found that really hard to watch when his like blood vessel pops in his eye
His
and then his
teeth shatter.
teeth start breaking. Yeah. That was tough. And so yeah, credit to the effects people, specifically on that part, because those were both very well done and very tense too. Like, I mean, that was like the one part of the movie. Well, there are multiple parts like that. There's another part I'll talk about later that I really liked, but that part specifically, the tension was really ratcheted up. And, you know, yeah, like you said, he's really cooking, but then it sort of is allowed to waft away after that.
And you think you're gonna get a bite of something juicy, you know, after all the smoke is cleared, and he's like, oh, actually, it's a a C-store chicken sandwich that's been sitting there all day long, because yeah, like he's not as skilled a director and a screenwriter, I guess, with his co-writers. They're not as good as Ari Aster at actually being focused and to have intent. And yeah, like there's just too many moments where there's nothing happening that you care about, or the actors just are giving you nothing. And I know not everyone can write, like high pressure family drama, but we could have gotten, I guess, more like a better college life story mixed into this, maybe. I don't know. I'm just I just want to help these guys do better, I want their director's cut. There's a director's cut of this movie, Matt, I guarantee you. And it will be the best version of this movie.
Yeah, and then in the back half, it sort of becomes more about like the investigative elements. We start getting answers to the questions, and unfortunately, like many films, this film was better when the mystery was better before we knew the answers, and then once we get the answers, it's kind of just, I don't know, very like run-of-the-mill, generic cult stuff, and they just don't bother really explaining anything with the cult, with how the powers work, with how the possession works, what even this demon thing is, and
what does it want?
Yeah, what does it want? Yeah, there's no motivation or anything, and it's just like, yeah, like it just gets very careless in both that and I don't know if you noticed this, but one of the points in the movie where I just kind of had to shake my head and just kind of go like audibly just say what, was when she goes to the police station and that cop, it was right there in the trailer, that cop, he shoots himself under the chin, but then like blood splatters on like the glass in front of him as if he was shot in the back of the head.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, what are we doing? Like, it's becoming very careless. It's, very, very, I don't know, just an afterthought at that point.
Because, like, do you think that was just a digital post-production effect and not like a genuine blood spatter made by a technician, like in the real world? Because I think that's part of the problem, I think.
Well, I think it was real, but they were working with the budget they had, and I'm guessing that was really the only way that they could do that shot, because what I'm guessing is that there was probably somebody under the cop, like under the desk, that their job was to like shoot the blood on the window, and that was the only way that they could make that effect work. And so yeah, that's kind of, but I did notice at some parts when a couple minutes after that, when the 5 cops all like shoot each other in the lobby, I did notice there was definitely some digital blood during that part, like very, very, very obvious digital blood. And so, yeah, I mean, this movie was very constrained by whatever budget they had. I mean, this is a Shudder original, so oftentimes these directors are working with no more than 5 or 10 million at the most.
And you can see that in the sets, like they're just in dorm rooms or on the roofs of buildings, or just like walking in sidewalks or at that diner. Like the limitations are all over it. But in the end, it's like I'm still glad that they're making stuff like this. because like this would be what, like back 30, 40 years ago, you would have bought this kind of a movie, or rented it rather at your local, video store, because like that's the quality you're working with. This isn't a master of horror, but this is a technician, a yeoman. He's not quite elevated up the guild, as it were. But they got to give him money to do something, so he'll make this shit.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, as we sort of get to the end here and close out, I do want to know what you thought of the end, because I have no idea what was happening at that point. Like basically, so her dad, she meets with her dad before he's executed, and it makes it seem as if she like transfers the demon to him by like touching him. But then he is executed, and it seems as if he is using the demon powers to stop the guy from basically giving him the lethal injection.
Yeah.
And then it just happens anyways. And then at the very last shot of the movie is the girl looking up at the camera with a smile, as if the demon never left her. And so, I mean, what do you think happened there? What is going on?
What is happening there is Christensen trying to be clever and doing a bamboozle. That's what he's trying to do there. Because yeah, it's and it makes you wonder, like, well, at what point is the plan ever the plan? And like, was the demon actually sleeping, like the lady was saying? It's a unreliable narrator situation. It's just a part of the plan to make the people think that the danger is over, but it's just going to go back out into the world and do its thing. Because I never understood how like the ritual they were doing was supposed to. Yeah, because their plan was put it into a host that's gonna die, so then it won't have a host anymore. I get that, but yeah, it's just so they can have a sequel. They have to leave the door open for that. The real horror is the audience having a happy ending getting stolen from them. Ha 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 ha! You should have seen it coming.
Yeah, and I have no doubt you're right about that. About the. He's just kind of trying to pull a fast one there at the last second. But, again, it just doesn't work, because as you're watching it, you're just hung up on all the logistics, because, there are no rules in place. He hasn't set up the parameters of how the demon works. So during that entire scene, I just found myself questioning what was happening every step of the way. And then when the ending finally happens, just this kind of like, okay, like, I guess, and then it's over. And so, yeah, I don't know, just a very anticlimactic way, because I was very taken out of the film by that point.
But at the same time, would you watch another movie, or, maybe look at this as the pilot for this limited series of it? Would you like to see them have more time to come up with more unique kills, flesh out this story more, turn this character into the villainess she's supposed to be, I guess? Because eventually, like, I don't know, you could just turn her into an anti-hero after a little while. Like, what if she was in a partnership with the demon, and this is like a supernatural superhero story instead?
Yeah, I mean, I totally would probably watch more of this, only because I know what Christensen is capable of, and unfortunately, I think this is probably out of the 3 of his movies that I have seen, this is probably my least favorite, but I know what he's capable of. Like, I really liked Z, and I thought Superhost had an interesting idea behind it, but it wasn't quite as good as Z. And so, yeah, I mean, give him another shot. I mean, this guy is basically a day player for Shudder at this point, so he'll get in another year, we'll be talking about the next Brandon Christensen movie, because he just is on their payroll at this point.
I just want to shout out, he's the type of man to wear a Dharma Initiative shirt, so do with that information what you will. That was the Puppetman. That's kind of the problem. It's not quite hereditary, not quite Smile. It's more like the Bye Bye Man more than anything else. You get down to it. in the Mentionables this week, you have a highlight from YouTube for us.
Yeah, so are you familiar with this channel at all, Corridor Crew?
I am not. I
Okay.
maybe need to look into them because they got some good pull if they can get this guy to show up and make some content with them.
Yeah, so Corridor Crew is basically, they're a group of it's a VFX company based out of Los Angeles.
Okay,
And
yeah.
so they in their sort of, I mean, they do VFX work for like movies and short films and stuff, but in their spare time they record these YouTube videos that are basically them like critiquing mostly critiquing VFX in big blockbuster films, but they've sort of expanded their reach, and they just started up a new series called like it's basically like a director's sort of retrospective series where they have a director on to talk about their films, and their first inaugural episode director was David Lowery, and this is really good stuff in my opinion. They get surprisingly in depth for like a 15-minute YouTube short basically. And they talk about all of his big movies. They don't really go into like the ghost story and stuff like that, but they talk about Pete's Dragon, they talk about Peter Pan, they talk about, and then they spend the most time talking about the Green Knight. And there's a lot of really good info in there. A lot of stuff that I don't think he's ever like talked about before, like David Lowery has gone on record talking about before. They just really get a lot of good info out of the guy, and this is just an incredible channel overall in my opinion. And so I would recommend any of their videos, but this is their most recent.
Well, I'm gonna have to hit subscribe, make sure it's in my feed, because by God, I can't watch any more 40K lore videos or PKA clip highlights. I need some variety in my life. And David Lowery is definitely someone worth getting the scoop on, because the guy knows everything. Speaking of scoops, the family, we went to the local Berry Acres pumpkin patch because they finally are open for business. They got their corn maze going. They have pumpkins everywhere. You can take a photo on the back of an old car, which is what we did. Spent a lot of time doing that. Golly, there we go. Luca was even there in his Skelly outfit. He had a good time. You can spend a lot of money at these places because they have like, you could on the pumpkins themselves, on acai bowls, but really it's just an excuse to run this kid ragged because Jesus. It doesn't take much to put a nickel in her. So here's my recommendation to everyone is just have some simple, wholesome family time. Shut your brain off. Throw your phone in a pond and just forget about it for an afternoon, and then call the insurance company and have them send you a new one. It'll all work out, trust me. Yeah,
I gotta ask, that outfit that November had on, is that the outfit that the girl has on in Hocus Pocus?
She requested that one. She was like,
okay.
I want a Danny dress.
Yeah,
and
that is uncanny.
Yeah, no, she's been wearing it because it's the official brand. It's the official Disney product, I guess, if there is one. But yeah, the hat, the Halloween hat, has been on pretty much at all times. Then she on this trip she dove into the corn pit and rolled around in the corn, and then we got her a Starburst ice cream from Dairy Queen afterwards, and that got all over it. So we already have to wash this thing, and I'm not sure it's exactly made for it. But that was Theater and Stream 29, the Puppetman. Get your spooky on. It's at least worthy of that. If you like The Ring, it's in that same vein of quality. It's hokey, but it's something you haven't seen before, so might as well see it. Get that Shudder free trial, and give it a go. But otherwise, we'll see you all next week. We're going to be finally digging into some award season meat. We're going to be getting Killers of the Flower Moon at long last. Are you going to be bringing like a what do you call those things? It's the urinary version of a Camelback almost like a catheter, for the movie.
Yeah, you
theater.
almost need a catheter, or you need to look on what is that website? Go pee or something like that. That website that tells you when you should go pee during movies. Yeah, gosh, this is 3.5 hours, I believe, and so yeah, it's gonna be a marathon sesh. You're definitely gonna want to hold off on the 60-ounce movie theater large size Coca-Cola for this one.
Yeah, maybe just get some nibs, or something small, or no snacks at all. As I've been going to theaters more these days, eating at the theater just is not as much fun as it used to be. Not only for the pocketbook, but for my gut. I'm an old man now. We don't need to know about that. We'll see you all next week, everybody. Take care.
Yeah.